The woman who wanted to get married in my house had the audacity to exclude me from the guest list. But on the wedding day, she discovered in the worst way that the house was not hers, and that her fairy tale would end right there at that door. My name is Jolly, I'm 34 years old, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I work as a project manager at a technology company, and outside of work, I take care of the house I bought with great effort a few years ago. It's a beautiful house with a huge garden for bedrooms, a swimming pool, and a living room that I used to rent out for small events before the pandemic. But this story isn't about my job. It's about my family, or rather my husband's family, and especially his sister, the so-called Elise. She is 27 years old and has never worked a single day in her life. She lives with her parents, my in-laws, who are on the other side of town. And even without doing absolutely anything, she behaves as if the entire world exists to serve her, including me. I've never liked Elise, and I make no effort to hide it. The antipathy is mutual. She thinks I'm conceited, arrogant, and haughty. And all for what? Because I was one of the few people who dared to tell her the truth to her face. Something like, hey, maybe you should do something with your life, work perhaps. But no. Elise lives in a little world where she is the princess and everyone else is just an extra. Things started to get out of control when she got engaged to a guy named Patrick, an Irish banker she met on one of those apps. Within a few months, she was already saying they were going to get married. Okay, her problem. But then she dropped the bomb. She wanted to have the wedding at my house. No joke. One day she showed up here with my mother-in-law, saying it would only be for 2 days, that it wouldn't even be noticeable, that it was the perfect place because everything could be done there. The ceremony in the garden, the dinner in the living room, the reception on the terrace, all lovely. And since the groom was bringing relatives from Ireland, she also wanted them to stay here overnight, in the rooms of my house. My husband felt uncomfortable, of course, but he was direct. The decision is yours. The house is yours. If you want to say no, say it. And at that moment I said yes. Today I know it was the worst mistake of my life, but at the time, I just wanted to avoid more drama. I wanted to look good, to keep the peace. And just like that, without knowing it, I signed my own sentence because what Elise would do next would cross all the lines, all of them. At first it seemed like everything was going to be fine. She would come here with her parents, show the place, take measurements with the decorators, make videos for Instagram as if it were a tour of her own house. Yet, she said my house as if it were hers. I would listen from the kitchen and swallow hard. It's just for a few days, I kept telling myself. Afterward, she'll thank me for it. But no, Elise didn't thank me. On the contrary, she started acting as if she were doing me a favor by using my house as the stage for her fairy tale. One morning she arrived at 6 a.m. without notice, saying she needed to see how the preparations were going. From the beginning, I always felt out of place with my husband's family. His name is Jake, and he's the best person I've ever met. We've been married for 8 years, but we met in college. He came from a simple, hardworking family, completely dominated by the younger daughter. My in-laws, Carol and Rick, always revolved around Elise. If she wanted something, she got it. If she screamed, they listened. If she threw a tantrum, they spoiled her. And if she made a mistake, it was someone else's fault, never hers. At first, I thought I was exaggerating, but the more I observed closely, everything made sense. While Jake worked his tail off with 2 jobs to pay for college, Elise left everything half done. She started 3 different majors and finished none. She says that university is a prison of the capitalist system, and her parents applaud. They say she's spiritual, free, too sensitive for this real world. But the real world is where I live. And that's why, when I bought this house with the help of my father, who only paid the down payment and left the rest to me, I promised myself it would be my refuge, my safe space, my corner of peace. Elise always hated this house, or rather, she hated the fact that I had something she didn't. Once, when she entered for the first time, she said, "Wow, it's cozy. A bit lacking in personality, but it has potential." I laughed, but inside I already knew what was coming. The competition, the invasion, the jealousy disguised as passive-aggressive criticism. I tried to get close to her in the early years. I invited her to dinner, wrote to her on her birthday, even offered her help when her car broke down. But nothing worked. Elise insisted on ignoring me or responding with contempt. Once I told her her dress was pretty, and she replied, "Thanks. I didn't think it was your style." I just swallowed. Jake noticed it. Of course he always noticed, but he grew up with the burden of having to protect his sister. When I complained, he would say, "That's just how she is. She has insecurities. Try not to take it personally." Easy for him to say. He was never the direct target. I was the one who took the hits. There was one time when his parents came with Elise just to take a look at the house. According to them, it was a Saturday morning. I was in my pajamas doing laundry and cleaning the kitchen. When I opened the door, Elise walked in as if she owned the place. She went straight to the garden, took photos, recorded stories showing the furniture, and said out loud while filming, "This will be the vibe of my wedding, clean, minimalist, but elegant." I was frozen. She didn't ask for permission, didn't ask anything. I felt like an extra in my own home. My father-in-law said, "Let her dream, Jolly," as if I were a witch for being uncomfortable with that, as if I always had to give in. After that day, I started paying more attention to the details. Elise didn't just come to take a look. Each visit was an inspection, a silent gathering of information, as if she were mapping out the territory she thought she would completely control. One weekend, she brought 2 friends without notice. Jake and I were watching a movie in the living room when we suddenly heard loud laughter coming from the hallway. I went to the door and ran into the 3 of them walking around as if it were nothing, with wine glasses in hand. "We're just checking out the space." "Relax," she said, as if I were the site manager, not the owner of the house. Jake felt uncomfortable, but once again he said nothing. I felt a knot in my stomach. And the worst part is that Elise didn't just do that with my house, but with everything that belonged to me. "When I bought my new car," she commented, "an interesting choice, quite basic but functional." When I published an article about innovation and project management on LinkedIn, she commented sarcastically, "That's great, but isn't it exhausting to live just to work?" Each of my achievements became an annoyance to her. And her parents, always on her side, always with that attitude of she's just different. She wasn't. She was cruel disguised as sweet, a professional in passive aggression. But I was raised differently. My parents never spoiled me. If I wanted something, I had to earn it. When I told them I wanted to buy a house, my dad said, "Okay, I'll help you with the down payment, but the rest is yours. And you'd better rent out a room to pay the mortgage." And that's what I did. I rented out 2 rooms for almost 3 years while balancing work and my MBA. No one gave me anything but tough, sincere advice, and that shaped me, made me strong. That's why I found it so unbearable to see Elise portraying a life she hadn't built, as if my house were the stage for her theater. There was one night in particular that I will never forget. My in-laws came to dinner at Jake's insistence. I made lasagna, set the table with care, lit candles. I thought it could be a moment to reconnect. But in the middle of dinner, Carol blurted out, "Elise is thinking of moving in here after the wedding. Who knows, maybe use the guest room for a while." I almost choked. "Excuse me? What?" She laughed. "Oh, nothing serious. Just an idea she's tossing around." Tossing around where? In their heads. In the family WhatsApp group that I'm not in. Jake didn't say a word. Elise smiled with her eyes as if to say, "Guess what? Silly. I'll even take your bed if I want to." After that dinner, I broke down in the bathroom. I closed the door, sat on the cold tiled floor, and cried silently for several minutes. It wasn't just about the room, not even just about the house. It was about the constant emotional abuse disguised as kindness, as good intentions. It was feeling like an intruder in my own space, as if everything I had built with so much effort could be taken by someone who never lifted a finger for anything. The worst part was seeing Jake trying to remain neutral. I knew he loved me, but that guilt he had carried since childhood made him hesitate, as if defending his wife was betraying his sister. The feeling of being alone in that dirty game was eating me up. And with every new poisonous comment, with every casual visit from Elise, it became more evident. She wasn't just an excited bride. She was a usurper, and I was surrounded. The following weeks were a circus. Elise practically transformed my house into her wedding's command center. She sent packages here, boxes with decorations, dried flowers, fabric samples, candle holders, boxes with the groomsmen's names, all in her name, but with my address, without consulting me, not even giving me a heads up. One day I came home and almost tripped over a photographer's tripod set up in the living room. She had done a photo shoot with the groom here while I was at work. She didn't even ask for permission. She just showed up, opened the door with her copy of the key, and made herself at home. I confronted Jake. I asked him if he thought all of this was normal. He hesitated. scratched the back of his neck and said, I agree she's going too far, but it's almost over. Just hang in there until the wedding day, please. And me? I was tired of hanging in there. I couldn't take it anymore. The last straw that week was when Elise brought 2 decorators for a technical visit. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon with clipboards and flashlights and started measuring the living room walls, commenting on the lighting, considering hanging fabrics from the ceiling. I was sitting in the kitchen trying to finish a work report when I heard one of them say, a beautiful reception atmosphere can be created here as long as the lady of the house doesn't get in the way. I stood up, went to him and said, the lady of the house is right here, and you are in my kitchen. The man turned pale. Elise let out a nervous laugh and said, ignore her, she's stressed. Ignore her in my house in front of strangers. The following Saturday, she arrived at 6 a.m. 6 in the morning. She came in without knocking, woke me up with the noise of the door, and started walking around the house with a clipboard in her hand, talking to herself, commenting on where each piece of furniture would go, where the makeshift altar would be set up, who would sleep in which room. When I came downstairs, still in my pajamas, she pointed to the hallway and said, if you could take down those pictures of the 2 of you, I'd appreciate it. They don't match the vibe I want to create. I stood there paralyzed. What did you say? She looked at me with a completely neutral expression and said, the pictures of you 2. They don't go with the style of the decoration. Everything will be clean, modern with neutral tones. I don't want those couple frames in the hall. My in-laws arrive in 3 days. I want to make a good impression. I stared at her for several seconds, trying to understand if this was real. Are you asking me to erase my life from my house, so your lie can seem more believable? She rolled her eyes. Oh, Jolly, it's not that big of a deal. It's just for 2 days, then you can put them back up. Think of it as helping me in my big moment. My big moment. My house, my job. My marriage. Everything had to be temporarily archived so the princess could have her big moment. And then came the final stab. She started assigning the rooms. She said her parents would stay in my room, mine with my bed, my clothes, my bathroom. The smaller guest room would be for a cousin coming from Ireland. And she, of course, would take the largest one. The room I had decorated with so much love as an office and reading space. The suite with the walk-in closet is mine. I can already imagine the making of photos. I asked incredulously, and where exactly are Jake and I going to sleep? And her answer was a slap in the face. Oh, you guys can go to your parents' house or a hotel. You guys make good money, right? She said it with a sweet smile, as if offering a perfectly reasonable solution. I laughed a nervous laugh. Are you telling me we have to leave our own house to pretend that you live here with your parents? And she, without a hint of shame, said, well, that's what I told Patrick. That this house belongs to my family. That I grew up here. It wouldn't make sense for you to be present. It would be weird for the guests. I was paralyzed. I felt my heart in my throat. She was telling me, point blank, that Jake and I would be kicked out of our own house so she could maintain an absurd lie to her fiancé and his family. I tried to reason, still clinging to some logic. Don't you think this is too much? They're going to realize that nothing here has anything to do with you. She shrugged. They won't notice anything if you cooperate. We take down the photos, put away some things, add some arrangements with my touch. They're not going to do a forensic inspection. It's just a basic little scene. She had it all planned out. She said that after her bachelorette party, she would go directly to the salon and then come here dressed as a bride, as if it were a triumphant arrival at her parents' house. The cherry on top. When I asked her if we would at least see each other during the ceremony or dinner, she answered with the naturalness of someone ordering a coffee. No, you're not invited. My parents sent the invitation by mistake. I never planned for you to be at the celebration. I don't want you to ruin my moment. At that instant, I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. She was going to use my house, kick us out of it, lie about everything, and still exclude us from her own party. I ran to tell Jake. He was sleeping upstairs. I went up in a fury, entered the room, and shouted, did you know we're not invited to your sister's wedding, which is going to use our house, and on top of that, she wants us to disappear? He jumped up, half dazed, and said, what are you talking about? Jake came downstairs with me, still in his pajamas, his hair all messy, trying to understand the chaos I was unloading on him. Elise said she never invited us. That it was a mistake by your parents. And what's more, she told her in-laws that this house belongs to her family. His eyes widened. What? She said that? That the house is hers? I nodded furiously. He turned to his sister. You told Patrick this house is yours. She didn't even flinch. Jake, it was just a little white lie. You know how those traditional Irish people are. They really value the family figure, the house where the bride grew up. I didn't want to seem like some rootless nobody. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to say that out loud in front of me. Jake ran a hand over his face in frustration. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're building a whole charade on top of Jolly's house, and on top of that, you want us to disappear to maintain the lie. Elise crossed her arms impatiently. Look, if this is going to cause so much drama, then don't come. I don't need any more negative energy on my special day. I swear I felt my blood boil. Negative energy? I am negative energy in my own house? And she, with the most stone-cold face on the planet, replied, You've always looked at me with judgment. You always thought you were better than me. Now you want to sabotage my wedding because deep down, you hate that I have someone who loves me. Jake exploded. Enough. Elise, you have crossed every possible line. Jolly, you decide what to do. If you want to cancel everything now, I support you. But I couldn't think clearly. My mind was spinning. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat in the corner for an hour, trying to understand how someone could be so manipulative, so abusive, and still come out looking like the victim to her family. Because yes, later Jake's parents called, not to support us, but to try to convince us to leave everything as it was, just so as not to tarnish Elise's image. The mother-in-law called first. A trembling voice, a sweet tone. Jolly dear, we just want to avoid a scandal, you understand? Everything is so close now. The guests are arriving, the vendors are paid. You wouldn't want to be remembered as the woman who ruined your husband's sister's big day, would you? I remained silent. I was so angry that if I opened my mouth I would explode. The nerve of trying to manipulate me with guilt, as if I were the villain, as if Elise hadn't blatantly lied, appropriated my house, and kicked out her own brother. Jake took the phone from my hand and said, If you're calling to pressure Jolly, you can stop right now. She has every right to cancel this farce. Minutes later, his father called. He tried to be more rational. Jake, think about it. The family's reputation is at stake. Elise made a mistake, yes, but now is not the time to sink her. She won't survive a humiliation like this. Her in-laws are conservative, you understand? They'll cancel everything. And if they cancel, how will she recover? Jake replied directly. She should have thought of that before building a castle of lies on top of my wife's house. Meanwhile, Elise was sending messages. First, passive-aggressive ones. I hope you're not planning to sabotage my day, just because you're jealous. Then desperate ones. I just need 2 days. Jolly, you have a whole life in that house. Let me have just this moment. And finally, threatening ones. If you ruin this, I will never speak to either of you again. I swear to God. That night, I sat on the sofa with Jake, and I showed him everything. The messages, the security videos of Elise entering with strangers, the piled-up boxes with her name, the offensive audio messages. He was silent for a long time, and then he said, There's nothing left to discuss. She crossed every line. And that's when, in the firmest voice I had ever heard from him, he said, If you want to change the locks tomorrow, I'll help you. This house is yours, Jolly. And if anyone has to leave, it's not us. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. But I still had to decide how to act. Update 1. Last night, something happened that destroyed what little was left. I was finishing tidying up the guest rooms. Elise had demanded that I get everything ready for the arrival of her in-laws. Yet, even after everything that had happened, she continued to act as if I were the receptionist of a 5-star hotel. I was about to give up, to be honest. Jake was also exhausted. But we had decided to keep our word, do what we promised, and then cut ties. Not for her, but for our peace, for our mental health. Until I received the last message. Short, cold. Impossible to ignore. Get rid of those ridiculous pictures in the hallway once and for all. My in-laws are arriving early. Oh, and don't forget to leave before 9. I don't want any strangers here when they arrive. I read that message about 5 times. Strangers. Jake and I were the strangers in her narrative. In my house, in the house that I financed, cleaned, cared for, renovated, decorated. A house I had dreamed of owning since I got my first promotion. A house where I lived through good times and bad, where I cried, celebrated, rebuilt myself. And now I had to erase everything to fit into Elise's illusion. I just stood there, staring at my phone screen, And I swear to God, I felt something break inside me. Something I had been holding back for years, an invisible line between trying to keep the peace and submitting. And that line had just snapped. I got up, went to my room, picked up the phone, and dialed the first number that came to mind. A 24-hour locksmith. Jake looked at me from the bed and asked, "Are you sure?" And I replied, "I have no more doubts." I called the locksmith, requested an emergency service. An hour later, a nice man named Marvin was changing all the locks on the front and back doors. I stood there watching every screw, every click, as if it were a ritual of liberation. At 10 o'clock sharp, I called Jake's dad. He answered on the third ring with an irritated voice. I said, "Rick, the house is no longer available. There will be no wedding here. From now on, Elise will have to deal with the consequences of her own decisions." He was speechless. Then he tried to protest. I just said, "Good luck explaining everything to the Irish," and hung up. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 with my heart racing. Not with fear, but with anticipation. I put on a sweater, tied my hair up, and went downstairs to have breakfast as if it were any other day. At 6:02, the doorbell rang. I looked through the intercom. It was the decorator, impeccable suit, clipboard in hand, and a confident look. I opened the side window and spoke to him directly. "Good morning. The house is no longer available for any event. You can call the person who hired you and explain that the venue has been canceled." He just stood there, confused, as if he hadn't understood. He repeated, "But this is the bride's house. Elise told me everything was arranged." And I replied, "She lied. The bride does not live here, and this house does not belong to her or her family." I closed the window without saying anything more. I went to the kitchen, took another sip of coffee, and tried not to think about what would come next. At 7:47, another knock on the door, this time louder. I peeked through the cameras. It was him, the groom, Patrick. Navy blue suit, tense face, cell phone in hand. I opened the door calmly. "Good morning. Can I help you?" He hesitated. "Sorry. You are?" "I'm Jolly, Elise's sister-in-law. And this is my house." His eyes widened. "So it's not. Elise doesn't live here. She's never lived here. She told you a story that isn't true." He was in shock. He thanked me, muttered something like, "I need to sit down," but went back to his car. When he left, my phone started vibrating. It was the princess calling, sending audio messages, texts, screaming in text. I ignored everything. At 9 o'clock sharp, royalty arrived. Elise in a gray sweatsuit, hair pulled back and a hungover face, banging on the door as if she were exorcising demons. "Open this door." "What did you do?" Jake appeared behind me and said, "Don't even try. This house is no longer your theater stage." She screamed, bang, threatened to call the police. So I opened the window again and said, "Bang one more time, and you're the one who's going to end up at the police station. You're not coming in today, and there's no wedding today." Update 2. I did what I never thought I would have the courage to do. After years of swallowing humiliations, trying to keep the peace, pretending nothing affected me, I exploded. But not with shouting. I exploded with action, with a boundary, with a no. Elise tried everything that morning. She called more than 20 people. Sent dramatic messages to Jake saying I was destroying the family and that I was a vengeful psychopath. She said she was going to expose me on Instagram, that she would tell the whole family what kind of monster I was. And I made pancakes. I sat with Jake on the terrace and we watched the empty garden, where in a few hours there was supposed to be an altar, or at least where she thought there would be one. At 10:15, Jake's father called again, this time nervous. "Please just free up the space. Let her have her moment. We'll pay whatever." And Jake replied, "You've never paid for anything. And it's not about money, it's about respect." And that's over. The call ended in a deathly silence. The real blow came at 11 a.m. when Patrick, the groom, returned. This time not in a suit, but in jeans and a t-shirt with a serious face. He asked to talk. I opened the door. We sat on the living room sofa, he on one side of me, Jake on the other. And there, in a voice colder than I expected, he said, "I went to see my parents. I told them everything, the lies, the staging, what she did to you. My father wanted to cancel everything. I just needed to hear it from you to be sure." Jake extended his arm, showed him the security camera videos, showed Elise decorating the house, receiving packages, sending messages saying the house was hers since childhood. Patrick's face crumbled. She lied about everything. I was about to marry someone who even invented her family's past. He stood up, thanked us, and said he was going to take care of everything. When he left, I sat there looking at the door, still trying to process everything. At 1 p.m. the mass calls began. Guests asking for the address, vendors demanding deliveries. My mother-in-law sent me a 4-minute audio message, crying and calling me an ungrateful snake. She said I had destroyed her daughter's only dream. I replied with a photo of the new door key. Nothing more. Elise, of course, did not accept the end. At the end of the afternoon she appeared again, this time without makeup, her hair a mess, her eyes swollen from crying so much, or pretending to cry, I don't know. She knocked on the door more calmly and said in a choked voice, "Jolly, you won. Okay, you won. But look what you caused. My wedding is cancelled. My in-laws are leaving. Patrick doesn't even want to look at me." I didn't answer. She continued, "Are you happy now? Are you satisfied with what you did to me?" Jake was right behind me and answered for me, "No. We're tired. Tired of putting up with you treating everyone like extras in your fantasy. You lied, you manipulated, you kicked us out of our house, and you still wanted applause. And now you want to blame Jolly because the consequences have arrived. Grow up." She whimpered, made one last attempt. "I just wanted to have a nice day. I just wanted to feel special. And I?" With the firmest voice I could muster, replied, "You could have had all of that. All you had to do was be honest. All you had to do was treat us with the minimum respect. But you chose to lie. And now you're reaping what you sowed." She turned and walked away down the sidewalk like a lost soul. Some neighbors watched discreetly from afar. It was pathetic, it was sad, but above all, it was necessary. The next day Patrick came alone. He said he was returning to Chicago, where he lives. He said he had ended everything, that his parents were shocked, that his mother hugged him and said, "You were saved just in time." He thanked me. He said he should have suspected something from all the staging, from all the stories that didn't add up. He apologized for everything, even though it wasn't his fault. I truly forgave him because maybe he was the only victim bigger than me in this whole farce. After Patrick left, the phone stopped ringing, the shouting silenced, the messages disappeared. It was as if the world had suddenly understood that the party was literally over. Except that instead of the comfortable silence I expected, a strange feeling came over me. It wasn't guilt, it was exhaustion. A weight I had carried for years that had finally been lifted from my back. Jake noticed. He brought me a glass of wine, sat next to me on the sofa, and said, "You were stronger than I would have been." I smiled a little, but I had a lump in my throat. Not because I felt remorse, but because deep down, I knew that this battle was just the end of a much longer war. The war of being underestimated, of having to smile when they try to erase you, of giving in, until there's nothing left of you. Jake turned off his cell phone completely that night. He said he didn't want to hear anything more from his family. If after all this they still think you're the problem, then there's no more dialogue. And there wasn't. The next day his parents showed up at the house, but they didn't get past the gate. They stayed outside knocking, insisting. I was in the kitchen when Jake went to the door and told them without opening it, "You have no right to come here and demand anything." Elise deceived everyone. She tried to kick Jolly out of her own house and still had the nerve to take us off the guest list. There is no excuse for that. His mother started crying, saying that I had poisoned her son's mind against his sister. The father shouted that the family's reputation was destroyed. Jake just replied, "Then rebuild a new one based on the truth, because there's no more room for lies here with us." They left. In the following days, the news spread among relatives, and to my surprise, many people wrote to me in secret. Cousins, distant aunts, even an ex-friend of Elise's with whom she had fought years ago. They all said the same thing, that she had always been like that she manipulated, distorted, used others as a stepping stone, but that no one had ever had the courage to confront her as I did. "You just said no," one of the messages read, and that was enough to bring down her whole castle. After so many years of walking on eggshells, trying to be the understanding wife, the polite daughter-in-law, the tolerant sister-in-law, I finally understood the power of simply not allowing it anymore. Saying no didn't make me cruel, it made me free. But that freedom came with cracks, some visible, others internal. Jake started receiving messages from close relatives, telling him he needed to get his feet on the ground and protect his family, as if the simple act of defending the truth was an attack, as if not bowing to his sister's circus was an unforgivable betrayal, until he exploded. He replied in the family group for the first and only time, "Jolly is my wife. The woman you all got used to ignoring and disrespecting because you thought she was too strong to be affected. She endured in silence for 8 years, and now that she has set a boundary, you treat her like an enemy. Well, know this. If you have to choose between continuing to have a relationship with us or living in Elise's fantasy world, the door is open. But don't expect us to keep pretending that all of this is normal." I cried when I read that message, not from sadness but from relief, because finally someone besides me was seeing me, was listening to me, was defending me. Elise never replied. She never had the courage to refute the facts after Patrick confirmed everything with his family. She disappeared from social media for a few days and then came back posting motivational quotes like, "Whoever shines bothers others, and people don't understand free souls." I just laughed. It was predictable. It always was. What I didn't expect was that this time, no one was willing to keep financing her theater. It's been a few weeks since that day. The house is quiet again. Jake cut ties with his family, and for the first time he doesn't seem to carry any guilt for it. Elise disappeared from the radar. No one knows for sure where she is. And honestly, I stopped worrying. For the first time in years, I look in the mirror and see someone who chose herself. Someone who had the courage to protect her space, her dignity, her story.